IB Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown podcast. National Championship Week edition, still a beautiful ring to it. Love saying it every single time. But we are now 5 days out from Notre Dame taking on the Ohio State Buckeyes down in Atlanta in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Winner takes all, winners crowned the national champions. So we are going to continue diving into our preview of this matchup today, Brian. We are now going to talk about the Notre Dame offense and the Ohio State defense. Yesterday, we covered the exact opposite in the Ohio State offense. So we got a lot of stuff to cover today, man. We're going to talk about Notre Dame's offense, big picture. Is this going to be the moment in the game where they finally step up? Then we're going to dive into a preview of the Ohio State defense, right? We're going to talk about what's made them good throughout the course of the season. What are some areas where Notre Dame might potentially match up well? What are some areas of concern a little bit, right? And then we're going to talk through statistics and stacking it up on paper. And then we're going to go and finally we're going to wrap this up with diving into the matchups that matter, right? We're going to talk through where are the areas that Notre Dame has to win. And like we talked about yesterday, winning looks a little bit different when you get to this stage, right? So where are the areas that Notre Dame has to win in? And I don't know about you, Brian. I do know about you, Brian. We're both pumped up for this, man. I mean, we're 5 days out. It feels like this is going to be a really long 5 days, but doing stuff here and getting to talk to everybody here in the chat and you and I getting to break it down over the next couple of days is going to make everything just go by a little bit quicker, man.
I mean, look, I usually the way I'm feeling today, bro, I'm checking out. I'm like, look, I'm resting. I'm saving my voice. I'm sick as a dog. But I've already done one show this morning, national show. I got you. We are doing our show. I got another one tonight, man, because I am so excited about this football game. And just because there's so much opportunity for Notre Dame to prove, we've talked about to kind of slay those dragons and kill those narratives. And this show is especially going to be fun because this is the side of the ball that's been the primary factor for so long. And I know we're going to dive into that too. But, I mean, look, this is what you play for. This is what you practice for. This is what the team goes through the morning AM workouts in the winter for in the middle of the winter, last January. This is what they go through spring ball for. This is why they spend, those hot summer hours working their tails off. This is why you bang every day in practice. And this it's all to be on this stage. Right, when you're at Notre Dame, it's to be on this stage, and it's not been easy. They've had to overcome a lot of adversity, including a bad loss, but most of the adversity's been through injuries and departures, and it hasn't been a clean year for Ohio State either. They haven't had as many injuries as Notre Dame, but their offensive line doesn't look like it was supposed to look like, and yet this team still keeps finding ways to win, and they got to do it one more time, you're trying to prove yourself to be king of the North, as we said yesterday. Beating 3 Big Ten teams on your way to a title is what you need to accomplish. And so we're going to have some fun talking about that, man. But, yeah, I've got a lot more on the plate, right? I mean, so this week with different things to talk about. But I'm excited about it, and I think this team's got a shot to go out there and win this game. And that's the big thing. It's just, it's not one where it's like, okay, they got to do all these things perfect. This got to do this. Hope this happens. You got to go play your game, and that's true for the offense. And of course, today we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about that, and I'm excited about it. And Trev, you even said to me before the show, like, this is the matchup that I really am looking forward to talking about.
Yeah, I mean, this is it, right? The thing that I've loved about Notre Dame's postseason run up to this point is they've been almost the narrative killer, right? Leading up into the national championship, right? I mean, they've been narrative killers since after September 7th. Right. They had the bulk of their schedule ahead of them. There's no way, like, Notre Dame has been playing in elimination games after that home loss to Northern Illinois. And there's people that, well, there's no way that they can rip off 10 games straight without losing. And they did. And then you get into the playoffs. Like, well, this is kind of a stage where we've seen Notre Dame falter and we've seen Notre Dame slip up. I know the final score was 27-17. But they held a 27-3 lead with 6 minutes left in that football game, man. I mean, that game was over once the fourth quarter started, and I think we can all kind of agree on that. All the momentum was wearing blue and gold. Then you get to the Georgia stage, and you get to that New Year's Six Bowl stage where Notre Dame hasn't been able to conquer that dragon, right? They haven't been able to win that New Year's Six Bowl in over 30 years, and they did that. right? And then a lot of the question was, how was Notre Dame going to handle success? Were they going to be able to go into the Orange Bowl against a hot, really good Penn State football team and win, right? Were they going to be able to do the things necessary to advance themselves to the national championship? And you guys have seen it. You see what the national narratives are, right? You guys see, well, Notre Dame can't win this one, and Notre Dame can't get past this team. And there's no way with all of their injuries they're going to make it past this next opponent. And here they are 15 games later, gearing up to play for a national championship here in about 5 days. Now, the biggest key heading into all that, which Brian and I are getting ready to break down today, is the Notre Dame offense. This is the side of the ball for Notre Dame that has been a lot of this, right? It's been up and down. And when it's up, that offense is really good. And this is a really hard football team to stop. But we've seen at times when it struggles, it goes on scoring droughts, right? Yeah. You get the Orange Bowl, and they didn't score their first points on the board until there were 17 seconds left on the clock. But then started to roll. They scored 24 points in the second half. So really, the Orange Bowl was almost a microcosm of what the Notre Dame offense has been all season long. We just got to witness it in about 60 minutes because what's a Notre Dame postseason game without a little bit of a heart attack, right? But Notre Dame's offense is going to be something that's going to be interesting to talk about today because to me, they hold a major key, not the only one, but the major key to downing an Ohio State football team because in their previous two matchups, that is the side of the ball that was not up to par with what Notre Dame needed, right? That's the side of the ball that in 2022 only put up 10 points. That was the side of the ball in 2022 that went scoreless in the second half and went 3 of 13 on third down. And then in 2023, it was almost the opposite, right? You had an offense that went scoreless the entire first half, and they weren't able to jump out and capitalize. So is this going to be the performance where they put everything together, Brian? I don't know about you, but I'm ready to dive into this thing, man.
Let's go. I mean, it's not just against Ohio State, Trevor, that the offense has fallen short. It's been every time they've gotten on this stage for the most part. I mean, there's been few exceptions, right? 2012 Oklahoma, 2020 Clemson. Yeah, I think that's the list of games where the offense prior to this year has done what's needed. I actually throw Penn State into that category of the offense stepped up.
Yeah.
And scored 27 points against a really good defense. But is that the anomaly or is that just who Notre Dame is now? And that's really what we're going to find out because I think Penn State's a really good defense. I think Ohio State's is a little bit better. You know, statistically, it's been better. They played better in the matchup between the two teams. I mean, Penn State's defense gave up 20 points to Ohio State. Ohio State's defense gave up 6 points to Penn State. You know what I mean? Like they're to me, them and Notre Dame have been the two best defenses of college football this year. But like, Trevor, let's go all the way back to, I mean, gosh, since Notre Dame's last title, you've got 05 USC and 2012. You know, Oklahoma is the exceptions. 2020 Clemson, when Clemson was missing 3 of their best defensive players and their star quarterback in that game as well. It's been, 2006 LSU Sugar Bowl offense gets obliterated. You know, you look at, 2012, how many games defense had to just carry that team in some big games. You know, you beat Michigan 13-6 that year. You talk about the offense just not being able to do anything against Alabama in 2012. You think of the Ohio State game in 2015, you fall behind 28-7. Now the offense was able to kind of rally back a little bit and make it 28-21, and then you faltered. But your struggles it was part of the reason Ohio State was able to kind of jump up to that lead. That and the fact that your head coach hired Brian McGorder as a defensive coordinator, that didn't help either against a really, really talented Ohio State team. 2017, your offense couldn't get it done against Georgia. They sucked against Miami in that game in 2017. And, you look at 2019, against Michigan, big stage, against Georgia on a big stage, the offense falters. 2020 in the ACC championship game, your offense doesn't show up. In the semifinal, the Rose Bowl, the offense doesn't show up. I mean, this has kind of been the story, right? 2021 against Cincinnati, your offense stinks. I mean, it's every time you get on this big stage, for the most part, with very, very few exceptions, your offense is the side of the ball that lets you down. And I don't know that I think the offense did what they needed to do in the first 2 rounds. And I think when they got that lead on Georgia in the second half, I think Mike Denbrock was like, look, we're not going to do anything to let Georgia get a short field and get back in this game because I don't think they can score more than 17 points against our defense, like from here on out. Smart game plan. Against Penn State, they had to step up and carry the day because their play was a part of the reason Notre Dame was down 10-0, to be honest with you. And they stepped up big in the second half and made some big-time plays. I mean, moved the ball 261 yards in the second half against Penn State. In the last 31 and a half minutes of the game, they had over 300 yards of offense and scored 27 points. Like, okay, great. That's cool, but can you continue that now again in this championship game? That's going to be the key because this is the side of the ball that has let them down so many times in the past. And I know you can't hold this group accountable for that. I mean, I get that. I mean, I think the offense did what they needed to do in the fourth quarter against Texas A&M on the road. Like, that was important. I mean, it was a 13-3 going into the fourth quarter. You scored 10 points in the fourth quarter to win that football game. You know, the offense does what it needs to do to jump all over Louisville. So we've seen this group step up. USC game, you know, USC's Notre Dame's defense is struggling against USC. The offense steps up and carries them a little bit. You know, so we've seen this group do that before, but this is the best defense they will have faced, in my opinion. So it's like, okay, yeah, you did it against those teams where you had better players than that team. We said going to the game, Notre Dame's got better players than Georgia. Not at every single spot, but overall, I felt they had the better team, and they proved it that day. This is the first time you're going up against a team that you don't, across the board, have better players. And there's some spots where they're better, and there's a lot of spots where Ohio State's better. But this is the one where it's like, okay, you got to be on top of your game if you're going to win this. I just don't see Notre Dame. You don't want to get into a 17-14 game again. If they do that and win, I don't care. But I'm just saying it's unlikely to me that you're just going to be able to hold this team to 17 to 21 points again. You know, I mean, if you can, great. But you as an offense can't prepare that way. You can't prepare like, no, we only got to get to 17 and we're going to 18. We're going to be fine. No, you got to be like, hey, look, we got to try to get to 30 and not put our defense in that kind of bind. Are they capable of doing it? We'll see. But they're going to need to. They're going to need a big performance from this Notre Dame offense.
Yeah, man. I mean, big picture, this is the side of the football that has kind of held down the narrative of Notre Dame being able to compete in these big games, right? Because you go through and you look at what the defense has done, especially under Freeman's tenure. But no matter what, Notre Dame's getting ready to play for a national championship, and there are still people who believe that Notre Dame can't compete at this level, even though they just watched them win 2 New Year's Six bowls against the SEC champs and the Big Ten runner-ups within 7 days of each other, right? But it's because the offense doesn't look the way that they do, right? Or the way that what most people believe championship contending offenses look like, right? Because Denbrock is calling the game very specific to what the offense needs to do in that game, right? You go through and you look at how they finished against Georgia. You know, you can go through and look at, you know, what they did in the second half against Penn State. And really throughout the course of the season, Notre Dame's offense just played to the level that they needed to, which has been sometimes frustrating as somebody that is a fan, that analyzes the team, because you see the potential. You can see them rattle off 21 points in one quarter against a quality defense. You see them put up 35 points against USC in 3 quarters. But sometimes, especially when you have a defense as good as Notre Dame's, the offense will just kind of the game will dictate what the offense needs to do, right? But in a national championship game like this against an Ohio State team where both sides of the football are very good, right? It can't be, well, we'll just see what the game dictates, because if you go into it with that mentality, the game is then going to dictate. You now have to dig yourself out of another deficit, potentially double-digit deficit in back-to-back games, right? We saw Notre Dame do that one time this year. That doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence that it's like, oh, they can just do it again against a defense that from top to bottom is better than Penn State's defense, right? And so it's going to be something that starting fast is going to obviously be a huge key. Every single game, it's for a different reason. But to me, this is what holds down the narrative for Notre Dame and them being able to compete at the championship level. Right. I mean, if you go back and look at Ohio State, it's not like Ohio State is competing for national championships every single year. Right. The last time they made a national championship appearance, they got blown out by Alabama. Right. You know, in 2022, when they were in the playoffs, they lost to Georgia in a shootout. but nobody cares about that because the offense looked awesome. Right. Ohio State's always in that conversation because they have, rightfully so, but they have Marvin Harrison Jr. and the Emeka Igbukas and the Jackson Smith and Jigbas, and now they have the Jeremiah Smiths. And so for Notre Dame, that's what kind of holds it down. That's why when they get to this stage, it's, Notre Dame's going to score 10 points because their offense sucks. Like that's unfortunately what some of the takeaways have been.
Well, and to a degree, part of that's justified too, because what Ohio State can say is like, listen, I could sit here and talk about like, why are we assuming that Ohio State is going to like play great in this game and step up in a big moment? Because as you mentioned, last time they were in the playoff, they missed a field goal and kind of choked away a big lead in the game, right? I mean, they did. They had a pretty good lead on Georgia and lost it, right? And you look at you mentioned 2020 when they got blown out by Alabama. That was a big one. By the way, it was 21-7. They had a 21-7 second quarter lead on Georgia, and then they had a 38-24 lead going into the fourth quarter against Georgia and lost that football game. And then you look at getting blown out by Alabama. It was 35-17 at halftime. You look at 2016 against Clemson, they lost 31-0. So why do we have this narrative about Ohio State is going to, do this or this, in the college football playoff? Well, because I also remember watching that offense against Alabama in 2014. And I remember watching Ezekiel Elliott just rip Alabama apart. And I watched that offense score 42 points and have over 500 yards of offense. I then watch that. I then went and watched them score 42 points in the national title game against Oregon. So like they're going to get that benefit of the doubt because of that. But then there's also been some games, as you mentioned, Trevor, where the offense has stepped up and scored points. And the thought is, and it's true, that the defense now is way better than it was in 2022 against Georgia and in 2020 against Alabama for Ohio State. And it is. And so that's where I think a lot of the narrative comes from. But at least there are games you can point to and say that one side of the ball stepped up and played well.
Sure.
And notice, hey, well, I'll pull a Brian Kelly. Well, we never got shut out in the playoff game. We scored 3. That's Ohio State did get shut out in the playoff game. Who cares? A loss is a loss. And in this instance, I don't think either one of these teams are those teams. But to your point, that narrative doesn't exist about Ohio State's offense in big games. They don't look at it and remember what happened in 2020. They don't remember what happened in 2019 when the offense, had a chance to win that game against Clemson and couldn't get it done in the playoff, which was a great game, by the way.
Yeah.
Then they blew was it 16-0 lead against Clemson in that game. Nobody talks about that. It's always Notre Dame's failures. It's never anybody else's failures. And you know what? That's fine because Ohio State still has things they can point to. Until this year, Ohio State had multiple playoff wins. They won 2 in 14. They won 1 in 20. And that's really one of the differences. But there are things I can point to and say, hey, look, this is what this offense has done at times. And now they have a defense to back them up. That's where it comes from. So yes, it's frustrating that narrative doesn't exist, but Ohio State has a lot more moments of, well, we stepped up in this moment. Notre Dame has almost none. And none on this stage.
Right.
I can point to a regular season game here and a regular season game there, but not on this stage. Last week was the first time that happened. And now you're going to say, okay, now you have to do it again against an even better defense. And when you compare the two, I think Penn State's got the better defensive line. No disrespect to Ohio State. They're excellent as well, but that Penn State D-line is legit. I think Ohio State's better linebacker and Ohio State's better in the secondary.
Yeah.
Comparing the two. And again, the gap between the two D-lines is like this, in my opinion. And if somebody wanted to argue with me that Ohio State's better, I'm not going to argue with them about it. I think Penn State's better, but it's like, I don't think you're nuts for saying Ohio State's is better. So that's kind of where I'm at, Trev, is like, I get the narrative.
Yeah.
It's frustrating that it's not applied evenly, but I get the narrative. But this is what's so great about this opportunity for the Notre Dame offense is, okay, well, this is what you want. This is your opportunity to kill that narrative, to end that narrative. And this is your chance to prove like, hey, we can get it done on the big stage.
Yeah.
And what does that mean, Trev? Does that mean, okay, they got to score 40? I don't care about all that. I care about making winning plays. if you only score 17 points, but in the fourth quarter, you make that big play to win the game, hey, all right. I mean, last year, if all the offense does is convert one more first down and not give up that drive and then just run the clock out and win 14-10, I'm going to be like, dude, you did what you needed to do. You fell behind 10-0. You scored 14 unanswered points. Game was on the line. You converted first downs. You ran the clock out. Ohio State got the ball back with 30 seconds, and your defense ended it. That's getting the job done. It doesn't have to be scoring 40. It means you got to do enough and make the plays needed to outscore your opponent. And you can't win in spite of your offense. That's really where we're at, because I don't think you can beat Ohio State in spite of your offense. I mean, maybe they get a couple pick sixes, but you can't expect that, Trev. I mean, you can't. Your offense needs to step up and play well. And honestly, this is what you brought Mike Denbrock in here for. And that kind of leads into my next point, Trevor, is I think that's also this offense isn't getting as much respect as it deserves. I mean, they have scored more points per game than Ohio State. And I heard Curt Cignetti was talking about, and it was actually a very fair analysis. I'm not banging on Curt Cignetti for saying this, but he talked about, he mentioned that Notre Dame scores more points than Ohio State. And I was like, all right, respect, coach. Like, you're nailing that one. But then he goes, but they get a lot of defensive touchdowns. And I'm like, okay. Notre Dame has, what do they have on the year? 7?
Yeah.
Defensive or special teams touchdowns? 7, yeah. Right?
Yes.
I think Ohio State has 5, right? So they have a punt return for touchdown against Indiana. They have an interception return, and they have 3 fumble returns for touchdowns. They have 5. So Notre Dame's still scoring more points per game if you take away the defensive and special teams touchdowns. So, but the narrative is still that Ohio State's way better on offense. And I kind of understand why. That when they're on, they've done really well against some really good teams, and Notre Dame hasn't scored. I mean, Notre Dame's scoring in the 20s every week, and they're scoring in the 40s in the playoff. I get it. But this is what this game can do, is it can say, okay, now you earn your respect. But I do think that this offense is not getting enough respect coming into this game, but you're either going to prove that disrespect as being valid because you don't play well in this game, or you say, you guys were wrong. We are better than what you think we are. And our numbers throughout the course of the season prove that.
I think, for Notre Dame, the issue that they've had on offense over the last, really up until the playoffs, is they haven't won the moments. That regular season and in the postseason is the moments that you needed your offense to step up and make a play. 2023 Ohio State, 2021 Oklahoma State. Yeah, there's so many examples.
2019 Georgia, 2017 Georgia.
Literally.
Right.
And so in the moments that you needed your offense to step up and make those plays, they didn't. But what have they done in the play? They've done that. And I said this at the start of the playoffs. Doesn't matter if you win 41-17 or 21-20 or 27-24. You
don't care if they win 2-0. I don't even care. Just yes.
Right. And so for Notre Dame, one thing that they have done in the playoffs is in the moment, even if it hasn't been as sexy on film and if it hasn't been that fun to watch, they've performed and executed for the most part in the moments that they needed to. Notre Dame's offense for most of the Georgia game was dormant, right? Like it just had no momentum, nothing really going for it. But in the time when they needed to put the game away and put it out of reach, you go on a 7.5-minute drive. You know what I mean?
But they even stepped up before that. It's like when your defense, you did get that late field goal drive to tie the game, and then another to take the lead. People forget, even before the strip sack, Notre Dame had just taken a lead against Georgia. It was 6-3, but your offense was kind of starting to, move the ball a little bit, and then the run game was starting to get going a little bit, and you had taken a 6-3 lead. Your defense forces the big play. You still had to punch it in the end zone against a really good Georgia defense, and you did. So even and then you made the plays in the fourth quarter to move the chains and run the clock out. So yes, you are correct, Trev. But I even think the offense did some things earlier in that game to step up. Now that doesn't mean they played well.
Sure.
But they at least did what they needed to do in those moments. And that's, to your point, that's what they had failed to do in the 2 previous games against Georgia, when the offense had the ball in the fourth quarter with a chance to win the game, and they couldn't get it done.
Yeah.
Twice against Georgia before.
Yeah, and talking fairly on both sides of the ball here, that's what impressed me about Ohio State's offense in the Texas game, because they didn't, right? Like they didn't put up the 42 and 41 points that they put up in the first round and in the Rose Bowl. But what they did do is they responded in every moment that they needed to respond, right? At the end of the half, Georgia started to get a little bit of momentum. So what do? You execute a perfectly called screen pass to Travion Henderson. It goes 75 to the house. Momentum is back with the Scarlet and Gray. Texas drives down. They tie the football game. Momentum's starting to swing over to them. And they go on like a 14-play drive to take the lead 21-14. Right? So, again, Ohio State's offense did what they needed to, but not a lot of people are talking about. They're talking about, Jack Sawyer's strip sack, and it's an 83-yard touchdown fumble return to ice the game, which was a fantastic play. But it's kind of the same thing. Because they didn't put up 40 points, not a lot of people are talking about the offense outside of that screen pass, right? It's because Jeremiah Smith got held to 1 catch for 3 yards, and they didn't put up 40 points.
They had so many penalties. I mean, there's always these excuses for why they didn't score in that game.
Right.
So if it wasn't for all the penalties, they'd have scored 40 on Texas.
Right.
Well, isn't that kind of part of being good?
Right.
Is like not committing those penalties and not having those mistakes. And
right. But for Notre Dame, now they have an opportunity to, if it's people that track the game like we do, and like I know a lot of, IB Nation does, and they watch how these games unfold, Notre Dame's offense is earning more and more respect from everybody game over game, right? Because of the second half performance, really the last 31 and a half minutes of the Penn State game, because of the responses that they've had. On the first drive against IU, tip pass, intercepted, momentum starts to go to IU. Next drive, 1 play, 98-yard touchdown on the number 1 rushing defense in the country at that time, right? And
then the next drive after that, you went 9 minutes. You had the ball for over 9 minutes.
Yes.
And ran it on. I mean, it was 3 yards, 4 yards. Janarian busts the 20, and you pounded them to take a 14-0 lead against the number 1 rush defense. Well, they were the number 1 rush defense in the country, but they're not anymore. Why? Actually, they still are. Ohio State's 3rd. They still are, but they're 0.2 ahead of Ole Miss. But they went down 10 yards. Their average went from 70 to 80 because Notre Dame ran for over 190 on them.
Yep. So they have another opportunity in front of them to continue to prove that narrative wrong and to continue to earn the respect of more national pundits, honestly, even some Notre Dame fans. There are some Notre Dame fans that don't believe this offense really still isn't worth its salt. And
yeah. But I get it. I mean, that's the thing is, Trevor, I get it. Go ahead, bro. Sorry.
No, you're good, man. We're on the same page. It's frustrating to a degree because of some of the things that they've done in the playoffs, but I understand where it's coming from because in these games, the offense hasn't shown up. Right? They haven't had that performance. They haven't had the performance of every single time they touch the ball, the opposing defense is like, oh my gosh, we got to find a way to keep these guys from scoring. Most of the time, it's the exact opposite. It's Notre Dame fans jumping up and down in their living room, staring at the TV, begging the offense to just not go 3 and out. You know what I mean? So I understand it, right? And some of the performances in the playoffs, I get it. Horrible outside of the last minute and a half. Not good on offense against Penn State. Can happen against a team like Ohio State. You can't bank on Ohio State electing to kick a 20-yard, basically extra point field goal instead of going for it on 4th down. You can't bank on that. So it's Notre Dame's offense has to step up. I'm absolutely in agreement with you. I understand where it comes from, but now they have the opportunity to continue to earn the respect of not just national media and pundits around the country, but from their own fan base as well, right? Which is a really exciting opportunity that they have in front of them, Brian.
It is. This, as we said, this team has just been a narrative killer all year. They got one more they got to do, right? I mean, don't play well in this game, and a lot of that stuff about the offense comes right back up. And again, justifiably. I mean, it'd be another big game that you didn't play well. And we'll see how it goes. Now, then you get into the question of let's kind of talk a little bit more specific about it, Trev. Can they score? And we'll dive into specifics of it, but can they score? And the answer to that is yes, they can move the ball and score in this Ohio State defense. But what does that look like? It's more about like, look, you gotta get to like 24, 27, is I think, where you need to be, maybe 30. Can they do that? Sure. But you're gonna have to play really well. And you're gonna have to play really well in all phases. And that means twofold. Units have to play well, O-line, receivers, running backs, quarterback, but then also in situational stuff, which we'll get into a little bit. But that's the thing is, look, this is a beat up football team. I'm not saying this to make an excuse. This is just reality. You're not going to you're not going to get spotted 10 because you've got more injuries than Ohio State. It's going to start 0-0, and Ohio State's not going to have any sympathy for you. But you just get to the point where we keep asking ourselves, at what point does it just, all right, this is just the one that can't get past? Is Anthony Knapp that one? I think it'd be more of a combination of all of them. It's Anthony Knapp now, plus not having Benjamin Morrison, plus not having Riley Mills, plus not having Patelho, plus not having Boubacar. It's just kind of not having Jeremiah Love being 100%. I mean, they just all kind of pile up after a while. But you know what? You've continued to overcome it. You've continued to win through it, and you've got one more left. I mean, that's where they're at. But this is not a situation where they've got to play out of their minds to get to 20. It's got to play their game. I was asked on the show today, like, what gives you confidence about Notre Dame? And I said, what can they do to win? I said, just play your game. This is the first time you've been on the stage where it's not like you need a Herculean effort to get to 20 points. You just got to play your game, meaning you don't got to, hope that they struggle and hope they make a bunch of – you force them to make mistakes, with a good game plan and execution. And you just got to come out and play well. O-line's just got to do what they've done in some of these games. I mean, we've seen them run the ball well against good teams. They got to step up and play well. We've seen Riley throw the ball well against some good teams. So we've seen him not throw the ball well against some good teams. Just got to play your game. And that's the big key. Will they play their game? That we don't know. We'll find out on Monday. But I do think going into this breakdown in this matchup, we're going to talk a lot about the Ohio State defense, and it's going to sound very glowing because it is. This is a great defense. But this is a defense that I do think that Notre Dame can have some success against, and we'll try to define what success against them looks like. But you're going to have to play well. You're going to have to earn it against this defense. There's no question about it, Trav.
Yeah, look, man, there's no little sprinkle of magic that Notre Dame needs to compete in this football game, which is the first time in my lifetime I've been able to say that at a stage. I mean, to be fair, this is only the second national championship that I've witnessed in my lifetime for Notre Dame. But outside of the 2012 game, like you don't need this magical, like a leprechaun comes down and you just have the luck of the Irish all game long, and you just have to hope and pray that Ohio State just has the worst game defensively that they've had in 2 years, right? Like it's nothing like that. But for me, can they? Absolutely. And the biggest way to get there is you can't be going on these droughts. I've been saying it all year long that it's a lot of this, and Notre Dame's offense is a lot of this, and it's very rhythm-based. And sometimes that's within the same game. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they come out in the first quarter, and you're just like, yo, Notre Dame might put up 50 against a good opponent. I felt that way after the first quarter of the Louisville game, and I was like, whoa.
And if they wanted to score more in the second half, they could have.
Yeah.
You felt that way against Navy. I felt that way against Army. Yeah, there's been times you feel that way, sure.
Yeah, but the issue is sometimes it'll be 10-point, 17-point quarter, 0-point quarter. And sometimes where it's not even close, which is frustrating, right? I mean, that Louisville game, you rattle off 21 points in the first quarter, and you had a combined total yards of offense from the second and third quarter of 60 yards, right? And so you can't keep living in that feast or famine mentality, right? Like put drives together, extend drives, because on the opposite side of the ball, Al Golden and Marcus Freeman are going to be asking a lot of their defense to stop Jeremiah Smith and Egbuka and Tate and Judkins and Henderson. They're going to have a full plate, similar to the offense, but both sides of the football are going to have to do what they need to in this one. It can't be hey, defense, we know you just got 2 straight 3-and-outs. We need you for a third because we're still waiting for the offense to get its wheels turning. And we know there's only 4 minutes left in the second quarter, but they'll get there eventually. It has to be a full effort. It has to be from start to finish, come out hot. Don't play and call things offensively to what the game is dictating. Go out and set the pace. And that has to be Notre Dame's mantra on offense. And if they're able to do that, I feel really confident about their ability to, one, put points on the board, and two, win this football game, right? So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at with Notre Dame's offense as a whole.
We'll be able to dive into those type of specifics even more when we get to our keys to victory later this week, Trev, and even a little bit later in this show when we talk about some of the matchups and things like that and the stacking up. But yeah, it's gonna be a fun battle, man. It's gonna be a fun battle. We're gonna get into part 2, and we're gonna break down Ohio State's defense and really dive into the weeds here. And a lot of film, watched a lot of film, very interesting takes. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this too, Trev. But before we do that, folks, hit that like button. See that little thumbs up right below us? Go and hit that for us. We'd greatly appreciate it. If you have not done so, sign up for the message boards at boards@irishbreakdown.com. And if you are someone who likes listening to a podcast platform, if maybe you're watching the show live right now or you're watching it on replay and you would like it to be cut up into little smaller segments, we do upload the videos. We do cut them up, and a day or two later we'll upload them. But we always, the next morning after a show, we'll cut up each segment into individual pieces. So like today's show will be broken into 4 parts, and we will put those up. So if you are subscribed to our podcast platform, you'll be able to get these shows in a different format. And if you like listening to us more than you like looking at us, which I could completely understand, you can also sign up for our podcast platforms there as well. So reminder, no mailbag today. So if there are some questions you'd like for us to address, go and throw in the super chat. Or if you're a message board member, go and throw that question on the board, and we'll go address it on the board. So you can find that at boards@irishbreakdown.com.